English is one of the two languages in Hong Kong, the other being Chinese Cantonese. It is used in academia, businesses, and courts, as well as most in governmental materials. Major businesses routinely issue important materials in both Chinese and English, and all roads and government signs are bilingual. Since the handover, English in Hong Kong remains primarily a second language in contrast to Singapore, where English has been shifting towards being a first language. The failing English proficiency of local English language teachers has become under criticism. And now we're going to be talking about the history of the English language in Hong Kong. When and who brought the English language in Hong Kong? Who? The British colonists. English was the language the British colonists brought to Hong Kong some 150 years ago, and it had never gained its position as the national language. However, the use of English language in Hong Kong more or less mirrored the colonial rule. When? English was the sole official language of Hong Kong from 1883 to 1974. Only after demonstrations and petitions from Hong Kong people demanded equal status for Chinese did the language become official in Hong Kong from 1974 onwards. Number 2. How did the English language spread in Hong Kong? For much of the colonial era, knowledge of English in the territory was largely restricted to British colonists and an educated Chinese elite class. But since the 1960s, knowledge of English has spread throughout the country and community. In 2011 census, some 46% of the population claimed to speak English on varying degree of proficiency. Although of these, the vast majority of Hong Kong Chinese who speaks English as a second language. The history of Hong Kong English can be traced back to the use of Chinese Padine English or Canton English, as it was called. This was trading Padine, but is a simplified form of business English mixed with Chinese, which was used as a lingua franca in the port of Guangzhou Canton in the late 18th and early 19th century.
What is the current status of English? The current situation of English in Hong Kong is the subject of two competing discourses, public one centered on the decline of language standards and an academic one centered of the emergence of a distinctive Hong Kong English. It is not the case that one is right and the other wrong. They are two ways of looking at the same linguistic development and both have validity for their very different purposes. After considering the social change behind the decline account, this paper examined the ground for recognizing an emerging Hong Kong English. It then looks at how various political change might affect a future Hong Kong identity, just the Hong Kong English might eventually become a public reality as well as an academic one. How many speakers? These statistics show a breakdown of the Hong Kong population by language. Based on the latest available census data from 2016, based on this data, around 4.3% of Hong Kong inhabitants were English speaker. What is the current rank in the International Proficiency Index? Hong Kong, China, 31 of 111, proficiency high, score 561, global average score 502, position in Asia 4 of 24.
How in English education implanted in Hong Kong? Over more 2 decades, Hong Kong has still kept in distinction of language priorities and language policy. During period in which Hong Kong is colony of Britain, English was official language while Cantonese was the medium instruction in kindergarten and primary school. The changing priority of language in language policy formation and implementation has been argued to be affected by multitude and factor from by political, social, culture, and economic forces. 2, 3, 4. To the agency of interpretation of various agent. 5. There is the need to analyze and changes before after the implementation of policy. 6. Of the factor influencing the changes. What are the progress for the improvement of English proficiency in Hong Kong? Progress such as after-school tutoring, foreign tutoring, complementing overseas teacher, English language subjects, and many more. What are the policies affecting English language use in Hong Kong? Since the end of colonial era, the Hong Kong government has adopted the biliterate and trilingual language policy with the aim to promote proficiency in writing English and Chinese and spoken English, Cantonese, and Putonghua among the people of Hong Kong. Policies such as the incongruence between policies recommendations and actual classroom practices, as well as the relationship between government responsiveness and public references, suggested the power and agency of multiple stakeholder, example, parents, teacher, and community members in the interpretation and appropriation language education policy. How is the attitude of people in Hong Kong about English? The people of Hong Kong adapted to use of English despite being colonized back in the British colonial period. People in Hong Kong actually advertise their country using English language. Language has become a part of their community when it comes to advertising, businesses, education, and media.
What the distinct features in terms of grammar, pronunciation, and etc. Features of Hong Kong English can be divided into three categories: phonological, syntactic, and lexical. In plain words, phonological feature refers to sounds, while syntactic feature refers to grammars, and lexical feature refers to vocabulary. To make things clear and readable to all of you, we try to avoid technical terms, so the renamed three categories are pronunciation, grammar, and vocabulary. Pronunciation. Hong Kong English speakers typically share a number of localized features of a Hong Kong accent. Some primary distinctive features of pronunciation are shown below as examples. Fewer vowel contrast Laver, 1995, defines that the vowel is a sound produced with no constriction in the vocal tract. To be simple, vowel is usually a, e, o, and u in English. In English, there is a difference between what are called long and short vowel sounds. Cantonese speakers tend not to make a difference between long and short sounds, but instead produce something in between, according to Center for Language Education, HKUST 2004. While native English speakers distinguish between hit and hit, Hong Kong English speakers pronounce them as the same sound. Other than long and short vowels, bad and bed is also a pair of examples. Fewer consonant contrast Laver 1995 defines that a consonant is a sound that is produced with constriction in the vocal tract. Roughly, what is not vowel is a consonant. In Cantonese, there are no sounds voiced as B, D, and V, and etc. When encountering sounds not existing in Cantonese, Hong Kong people tend to replace them with similar existing sounds. For example, involve becomes involve, zip becomes zip. Simplification of consonant cluster: when two or more consonants come together, it is considerably difficult for Hong Kongers to pronounce. Therefore, speakers keep only the first consonant and delete the rest to simplify the consonant cluster. For example, friend becomes fen, adopt becomes adopt. Grammar.
Beside pronunciation, Hong Kong English is also distinct in its grammar. The grammar in Hong Kong English is influenced by Cantonese. Sentence final particles such as R, la, ga, and war are used at the end of English sentences. These particles come from Cantonese. They convey different meanings. In the message conversation example above, war and la are used. According to Matthews and Yip, 2011, war indicates newsworthiness showing new information, while la indicates suggestion in Cantonese. These meanings are directly brought into English. They are not errors. Why? Because accents are affected by mother tongue. When you encounter sounds that do not appear in your mother tongue, you probably find it more difficult to pronounce. It makes perfect sense because you rarely pronounce them. The situation is just like foreign people learning Cantonese. Learners' accents must be affected by their mother tongues. We normally do not laugh at foreigners speaking accented Cantonese and do not consider them as having errors. Also, even British English has different accents like Cockney accent. People do not judge Cockney accents as wrong English. So there is no reason to regard Hong Kong English accents as errors or broken English. Local author who wrote in English. Chinese Y.K. Lee is a Hong Kong-born American author of Korean descent. She is best known for her international best-selling 2009 debut novel, The Piano Teacher. Lee initially wrote The Piano Teacher as a short story before deciding to expand it into a novel. The Piano Teacher is a book composed of two parallel love stories set during the 1940s and 1950s in Hong Kong. The Piano Teacher is a charming story, intricately told and keeps readers turning the pages.
The English language is still very much present in Hong Kong and is actually used as their second language. Even through the years of colonization that brought the English language to Hong Kong, knowing its advantage and opportunities, people in Hong Kong still continues to use the language, especially when engaging in international matters that can help them understand and negotiate better with other countries. Familiar words and phrases of today will slowly become obsolete and will be replaced with new words and phrases. The ease of travel will also help to shape the future of the English language with more and more interaction between different cultures as such. And that concludes our topic for this segment.